You're listening to S2E12 FM. Yes, you know what time it is. It is the time for the Chat Network. We've got Coach Zaid in the house. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Coach Zaid.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. How are you?
Still kind of in shock at the stats you were giving earlier about teenage pregnancies and the scourge that's escalated in our schools since 2020.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we can't run away from. We can't ignore it. We can't make it go away, no matter how much we wish it away. You're talking about all sorts of questions, like what age is the right age to start having the conversations about prevention education,
Yeah.
and the conflict it's creating. But yes, very important to keep those learners in schools to ensure, continuation of education and a better life for quality of life for them and their child, and cohesive family units. Definitely crucial topics.
It is, and I think one of the things that I think we need to question is it about when we need to have the conversation with them, or is it about, because the thing is, I don't think any learner or any teenager who gets in that kind of a situation does so because they didn't realize what the potential consequences were. I mean, the fact that they're not even experimenting, they are exercising that far their rights or their privileges or their opportunities, means that they already know what it is that they could potentially get into, but they don't really care about the consequences. They don't realize the consequences. So it's not about having the conversation about the birds and the bees and trying to control how our children behave. It's about why is it that they make themselves available to such behavior that is going to undermine their own dignity and self-respect. And when you look at it from that perspective, and you start seeing, well, you can't control someone else's self-respect. You can only instill it.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads into our topic for today about control, because we try to control things instead of trying to understand how we're impacting things.
And then we're dealing with the consequence more than we can with the solution where it lies in the beginning in the first place.
Yes, and the consequence is focused on controlling the outcomes, controlling the impact, controlling everything. We're solving the wrong problems.
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true. So today's topic is control. Oh, the big C.
The big C, and I like to call it the delusion of control, because everyone says control is a myth, but still everyone tries to control things, or they don't realize that they depend on control to be able to function.
Would you say everybody enjoys a certain level of control?
I think there's a difference between needing to have control or feel like you are in control versus depending on control to be okay. Most people that I know, they depend on being in control. And that's the problem, is that your need to ensure that you are always in control is what actually creates chaos for the people around you. And control is more about what you think of yourself rather than what you think of the people around you,
Sadly so.
or what you think they think of you. It's about what you think of yourself.
So when we talk about control, what are we actually talking about?
I think one of the biggest myths out there about control is that control is about power. It's not about power. Control is about predictability. I need to have predictability in my life, or else. And that or else becomes the messy space. And that or else is our subconscious thoughts, our narratives, our internal beliefs, how we see ourselves, how we need others to see us, how we want to ensure they don't see us. Because we have this very intricate internal conversation with ourselves about what we think others think of us and what we think of ourselves. And then control becomes a coping mechanism for that. So what are we trying to achieve with control if predictability is so important? Because predictability, everyone knows, is boring. But everyone's looking for that exciting, spontaneous life while they're trying to control everything.
Of course. I mean, that's the narrative. I'm a spontaneous person. However, can we do it like this?
Yeah.
Okay. So why do people fight for control?
Well, if control is about predictability, what does predictability do for you? What does it protect you from? Right? It's always, how does it serve us? Whenever anyone comes to me with a problem and they tell me, no, but I don't like this, and I say, yeah, but it's serving you in a certain way, so you can't stop doing it. How's it serving you? And they say, no, it's not serving me. I said, it is serving you. It's solving a problem for you. And if you don't understand what problem it's solving for you, you're going to assume it's just a bad habit. No, it's not just a bad habit. It solves a problem for you. If you don't know what problem it's solving for you, you won't be able to solve that same problem in a more effective, more productive way. Right? So, predictability protects us from being stupid. Well, okay, let me dumb it down a bit. Predictability protects us from being incompetent. It protects us from getting things wrong, because as long as things are predictable, we have comfort in knowing how we're going to deal with it.
Why are people so afraid of being wrong?
Good question. Because that's where the rabbit hole comes in, right? If I'm wrong, what does it do to my standing with the people around me? If I'm seen as incompetent, they have the perception that, hey, don't take advice from that guy, or don't take that one seriously, because they don't know what they're talking about, right? Now, if that happens, that means that my ability to influence the people around me and to have positive impact on them is reduced. And if my ability to influence is reduced, that means my significance is reduced. And if my significance is reduced, then I become irrelevant or invisible, and that's what I'm protecting myself from.
So my ego.
Yes, but the ego, and a good reminder for all of us today, is that your ego is not some external force that you're fighting. It's not something that's out of your control, or something that you have to keep in check. Your ego is the sum total of your insecurities. Again, what you think of yourself, not what others think of you, what you are insecure about. So you go into proactive mode, you go into preemptive mode to try to protect those insecurities from being visible to others. And that's what control does.
Okay. What role does trauma play in developing a controlling person? Like perhaps childhood trauma, perhaps being put in positions where you had to know everything, and so you develop into an adult who has control issues.
It's an excellent example, is that I've always said that what we take from the traumatic experience, or from any experience in life, is more important than the experience itself. So in that case, if the traumatic experience convinced you that, hey, I'm out of control, or I'm vulnerable, or I'm unsafe, or bad things are going to happen if I'm not on top of it, that's going to convince you that to avoid another recurrence of a traumatic event, you have to be in control. You're protecting yourself from a recurrence of that experience.
Who is vulnerable?
Vulnerable is what we decide. We decide if we're vulnerable or not. No one can tell you you're vulnerable. You have to believe you are because of what you believe you're capable of dealing with. And the problem is that as long as you're focused on control, you're not going to recognize that you have the ability to figure things out, which is the only thing that you can do to establish control. And here's the crazy part about control, right? It's an irony, honestly, is that for me to establish control, what do I have to do? I have to make order out of chaos, right? I have to take things that are unwieldy, that are all over the place, and I have to get them in hand, right? And the objective of control is to protect myself from things being out of control.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But the irony is that for me to achieve that coping mechanism, I have to first master the ability to create order out of chaos. And I'm mastering the ability to create order out of chaos because I'm protecting myself from the belief that I can't deal with chaos.
Man, that's a dog chasing a tail.
Completely. And that's what I'm saying. It's the delusion of control, not just because you're not ever in total control. Life is going to happen around you. Whether you like it or not, something's going to happen that you can't predict, because that's just what happens, right? So as long as you convince yourself that being in control is important, you're losing sight of whether you're equipped to deal with the unexpected. And being equipped to deal with the unexpected is having a kind of presence of mind about what are your resources, what are your capabilities, what are your opportunities, what support structure can you lean on, those sorts of things. And if you have that in place and you trust that there is good reason to believe that that is what will hold you in good stead, then you must just know that when you're aware of something going wrong, you must have the presence of mind, the composure to be able to draw on those resources and abilities to be able to deal with it. So recognizing your ability to solve problems, to figure things out, that's your superpower, not control. control diminishes that. Control, as long as you have success in outcomes because you believe it was your control over the situation that caused it, that will give you reason to believe that without control you're doomed.
And it's all a fight for significance.
All a fight for significance. Every single thing we do is because we need to be significant to someone or in some setting.
And that is, like we've got various areas that we have to exercise control in daily. Work, emotions, impulses, how to sacrifice in order to achieve the greater goals. You have to exercise some level of self-control.
Yes.
Like you can't go off at your boss the same way you go home and act out, for example.
Yes.
So it's not that people say, I just can't control myself, but at work, you're pretty capable because the environment around you doesn't support that behavior.
Yeah.
There's a negative consequence for that. But there's also negative consequence if you act out at home. You just don't care.
True. It's not that you don't care, it's that you have less reason to believe that the consequences will be something that you're not willing to bear.
Yeah.
So if you can trust that when you act out at home, your position, your role, your influence, your privilege is going to keep you relevant in that space, and the people around you are going to have to bend to your will, then you'll act out at home. But if you know that there's a threat of consequence, of major consequence, if you do act out, whether it's at home or at work, that's when you think twice. So you don't ever vent and rage in a safe space, in an unsafe space.
Yeah.
Right? You're always going to vent and rage relative to what in that moment you believe is a consequence you are willing to deal with.
Yeah, that's very important. And you think of children.
Yes.
At school,
Yeah.
like the teacher will say, you don't know this child at school, for example, or they'll say well-behaved, soft-spoken, and you get home and what is this person? I can't believe this is the person you're talking about,
Yes.
But that's exactly what you're saying, right? So what is a healthy way to strike a balance here?
A healthy way to strike a balance is to recognize what is the purpose behind the control you're trying to establish, right? Because you can't get away from needing to control certain things because you're accountable for certain outcomes,
Yes.
right? But are you controlling it because it's purposeful, or are you controlling it because you're protecting yourself from being wrong or from people not cooperating with you?
Okay, so I want to bring it down into a more personal space for people who are in relationships now, with controlling partners,
Yeah.
right? What does that look like? How do you know your partner is controlling and has, or you feel your partner has control issues?
That's a double-edged sword, right? Because I often encounter people who believe that their partner is controlling, but without their partner being in control, they're not willing to step up either. So it's easy to complain about the way the control is being exercised, but not being willing to actually extend yourself so that you are also accountable for maintaining the balance of what it is that you guys are trying to establish, right? So if your partner is a control freak, right, because that's a common term, if someone is a control freak, then you need to consider why it is that they believe that if they're not in control, they're either not going to get what's important to them, or you're not going to respect what's important to them, or life is not going to be the way they need it to be, or they're not going to achieve the goals for all of you together if that's important to them. The moment you just stop at judging someone because they're so controlling, you lose sight of the human behind it.
Very true. Becomes resentful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, you need to see what is control serving. If someone is being controlling, why is it that they have a need to be in control? Primary reason is because they don't trust the process of life, or they don't trust their significance with the people around them.
And this thing of significance keeps coming up. And it just goes to show that everybody has a need to be seen and heard.
My little quip about life is that I'm just a nobody trying to remind everybody that they're a somebody. Because everyone needs to believe that they're a somebody. And when you believe you're not a somebody, that's when you withdraw and become depressed and become anxious about the future and all of that, because the spaces in which you want to be relevant, the spaces in which you want to be significant, if it feels like or appears as if you're not relevant in those spaces, that's where stress comes from.
And then the fight comes up.
Yep.
That I do have a say and I do have a right and I'm entitled to.
Yes.
And that's when things spiral out of control. So, what does it look like? How do you deal with somebody who is trying to control you, or you feel is trying to control you?
You try to understand what it is that they're afraid of, and then you deal with that. But if both people are going to be defensive about it, or both people are going to be preemptively controlling about it, like don't control me and I'm not trying to control you, and then they have the debate about what's the motive behind the behavior rather than what the behavior is actually about, then you're not going to solve the right problems. Because if you're accusing someone of being controlling, and in their mind they think they're just being like accountable, they're just showing up and they're just taking responsibility,
Yeah.
right?
Taking lead.
So you already created a new problem now. Because you just implied that someone has malicious intent. So if you look at your partner who is doing their best to show up for you or the family or whatever it is, and you see that as, oh, they just want to be in control of everything,
Yeah.
then why would they want to be in control in a way that's going to give them more responsibility? It doesn't make sense.
Yes. And I
So-
think, yeah.
So then if you think it's feeding their ego because they just want to be important, okay, then why are they not 100% dedicated to spending all their resources and all their efforts and all their capacity on their own self-enrichment and upliftment? Why are they sacrificing for the family or for others around them?
I really like that because you can ask somebody that, okay, why are you not stepping up to fulfill the roles? Why is this person, you asking the wrong question?
Yes.
Not why are you trying to control me or tell me what to do? It's more of, why do you feel the need to direct me there? There's something in me that overlooked that. So, okay, let's evaluate. Why didn't I see that? Like,
Yes.
how come I didn't, I think that we ask the wrong questions. And I think that wounds start clashing.
Yes.
And then evidence, people, they start to compile evidence that bringing up the past and, you've always done this to me.
Yes.
And, and that's what control is. Basically, it's misinterpreted as well.
Yes.
It's just labeled as control. You're trying to control me, but that's actually not what it is at all. What if somebody is progressive?
Yeah, and what if someone actually has seen where your current behavior leads to, and they're trying to discourage that because, like, listen, this is not good for you. This is not going to get you into a good space. It's going to cause problems, and you're thinking, don't try to control me.
Yeah.
So now you just took someone who was genuinely, sincerely concerned about your well-being, and you turned them into an enemy.
Yes. And I find that very common because they say, you don't love me, you just want to tell me what to do, where to go, what to do, And I've had situations where people have said to me, all I do is ask where the person is, for example. And the other person says, you're not going to tell me where to go. That's
Yes.
the response. And it's like, I was innocently asking out of concern and like a regular question. And this person is like, no, you're trying to control me.
Yes, and here's the thing, right? And I don't know if this point will land or not, but I'm going to say it anyway. One kind of golden rule I always practice when it comes to this sort of thing is, if someone is answering a question that I didn't ask, then they're responding to the narrative in their head. They're not responding to me.
How many people are having conversations with themselves, man?
Right.
It's like, I asked you this,
Yes.
and then you took me there. And you try
Yes.
and redirect the person, but I didn't ask that. What I'm asking you and what you're answering is different. And they're like, don't talk to me like that.
Yes.
Now we headed into a different direction.
Exactly. Because now you're always like assuming what's their motive, assuming what's their reason for speaking to you like that.
Yeah.
And that assumption you're making is what you think of yourself based on past experiences. It's not what they may be doing.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, even if they were heading in the direction of wanting to control you because it makes them feel good, you have to ask them, why is it that they need to feel good with you?
Yeah.
Not just in general.
Yeah.
Because someone who's controlling, they're not going to be controlling with every single person they meet. They're going to be controlling with the people who they want must respect them. Or the people that they want must recognize their competence or their influence or the value that they bring to the table, right? It's always serving that purpose.
Yeah.
So if you have a low self-esteem, you're going to need to be more in control. And if you believe you can't control because you just don't believe in your ability to control, or you don't believe that the people around you will respect you, or whatever it is, then that's going to lead to you just becoming completely lethargic and uninterested in trying to accomplish anything, because what's the point? Where's the hope?
Yeah. And I mean, if you've got two people with low self-esteem
Oh boy.
and they are in a relationship and they both viewing each other as controlling. Meanwhile, you can see they're both completely out of control and it's chaos.
Yep.
You know, it's
And if the demons align, oh my God,
yes,
then it's even worse, because now it seems as if they're on the same page and they're creating this amazing life. And the only time they're going to realize what impact they were having is when they see the consequences of that amazing life they were trying to build.
yeah,
And they realize, like, oh my God, we got it so wrong.
yeah.
Or people just don't get us, and they go with this belief that people don't get us and they don't get us and they don't understand us, so this is my person and we're going to do our thing.
Yeah.
No problem, but eventually it's going to catch up with you, because you can't deny reality. You can only defer it until it hits you in a way that you can't deny.
Sure, that was deep. I think we need to take an ad break because wow, keep living in the river, in that land where that river flows through, you know, where the pyramids are, yeah. Because soon enough it's going to be undeniable. And that's when we call on Coach Said, honestly. It is the 15th of April, 27 minutes past 9. We'll bring you more after this. So we're back with Coach Zaid. Whew, we needed that breather because this topic is getting people hot under the collar for the right reasons. Accountability, knowing yourself, knowing your self-esteem. How do you feel about yourself? Your level of self-awareness. All of these things that you watch but don't absorb. You know, you don't fully do the work. You need to do the work, and relationships are work. Mm-hmm. And control is something that people are constantly accusing each other of. What role, Coach Zaid, does our upbringing play in our need to control, feel significant, enforce? You know, what role does our upbringing play in that?
I think it's what we interpret to have been the nature of what we were exposed to when we were small. So if we see our parents and they have a certain dynamic, then we draw our own conclusions about why the dynamic is there. We don't necessarily understand them. We just look at it and we think, oh, why was my mother so submissive? Why was my father so aggressive? Or why was he so controlling? Why was my mother so super critical and my father so placid and so kind of quiet about things and never ever stood up for us? The conclusions we draw from that then becomes our truth about how life works, and then we go out in life fighting those causes and those battles.
Yeah.
And majority of the time, people are preemptively controlling or preemptively defensive because they believe they need to ensure that they don't allow their partner to treat them the way they saw their parents behaving. So if we sometimes I get a couple where the woman is like extremely like defensive about anything her husband does, and when I ask her, it's like, no, I'm not going to allow him to take advantage of me, to abuse me, to be emotionally abusive or whatever it is, right? And then when you dig into it a little bit, you discover that the reason why she feels that way is because she saw maybe her father being that kind of harsh and abrasive towards her mother. And she made up her mind that I'm never going to allow men to treat me that way, right? So now here's where it gets really complicated and stupid, is that from day one, they preemptively protecting themselves from being treated that way. But that makes a couple of really ridiculous assumptions. It assumes that their husband was intending to treat them that way in the first place. So the moment you accuse someone of something they didn't intend to do in the first place, then you're creating a new problem already.
Yeah.
Right? And here's the second part that makes it really complicated or difficult to break out of, is that because they were preemptive about it their entire life with their partner, they're convinced that the only reason their partner didn't abuse them is because they didn't give them an opportunity to do so.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, and then we feel like we're in control. Like, you see, the only reason I didn't give you the opportunity to do it is why it is that you never did it.
Yeah. Like, if I didn't protect myself, I have to protect myself.
Yes.
So literally they are creating the thing that they fear the most.
Yes.
They're creating the situation. You create the situation you fear the most. It's like saying, accusing me of the attitude, of having attitude, is creating the attitude you're accusing me of having.
Yes.
When I didn't have it in the first place. And we see a lot of this. Now, there's a lot of things that's within our control, and there's things we cannot control.
Yes.
And how do people deal with the things they cannot control?
They try to control it.
Oh.
And then they drive themselves insane and they blame everyone around them for not cooperating, because if only I would be able to do this, if only I would be able to do that. But that if only is like imposing your belief and your perspective of reality on everyone else around you.
Yeah, yeah,
You're not solving problems, you're trying to control the problem.
yeah. And then you create more problems.
Major problems. You create major problems because control is the one thing that shuts down the human. It shuts down someone else's emotions and shuts down someone else's needs and wants and aspirations and dreams because they're not allowed to dream anything bigger than your control.
Ooh, that is powerful.
And that's how you destroy the self-esteem of your child, by controlling everything that they need to do and how they need to do it and what they need to pursue. And then you blame them for not cooperating. If only you cooperated, your life wouldn't be like this now.
Yeah.
Or you would have been more successful, or blah, blah, blah. Or look at you, you're so successful, but you're so miserable. Why? We gave you everything of the best. No. They don't want you to give them everything of the best. They want to feel significant. And if they feel insignificant to their parents, especially to their father, their self-esteem is stunted, and then they make themselves available to all sorts of problematic behaviors and scenarios and scenes and all of that.
That's very important. You've mentioned this a few times, especially I remember you saying substance abuse specifically.
Yes.
Can you please repeat that for our listeners?
100% of substance abuse cases that I've ever encountered till today, and I've got a few that I'm working with at the moment, 100% of them, they believed, for good reason in their own mind, that they weren't good enough for their father.
Wow.
And men need to realize this. You can't just be mechanical and provide. You have to be emotionally accessible and you have to be emotionally engaged. And if that's difficult for you, solve that problem. Don't tell people this is just who I am, so deal with it. You have impact. And I've always said men are failing us more than women, because when men step up, women don't have to. And then they can be the nurturers that they are biologically engineered to be.
And look at what problem that's created.
It's created all sorts of problems because now we've lost balance, we've lost
women
sanity.
at work.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be nurturing, guiding the home, doing whatever. When a woman leaves that role in order to step up and fulfill other roles because the man is not stepping up, it leaves a gap.
Yeah. And if anyone's taking exception to what I'm saying because they think I'm being anti-feminist or something like that, no. Just do yourself a favor and go and look at the stats on how many female health issues are related to excessive testosterone levels in the body.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Testosterone is a male hormone.
Yes.
You have it in, and men also have estrogen as well. But when it goes out of whack relative to your innate nature, that's when all the problems start coming up.
Very true.
Right? So don't take my word for it. You can do your own research. But there's a natural balance that is struck when we are allowed to operate in our natural disposition.
Yeah.
The moment you are forced, compelled, or even fear-driven towards breaking out of that natural disposition because you're afraid you're not going to be taken seriously, you're not going to be seen as successful, whatever the case is, you create disharmony, you create stress, you create dissonance, you create all sorts of problems. And the only thing that does is it results in either behavioral issues or chronic illness, one of the two.
And that's proven.
It's
right?
proven.
It's proven. It's there. The stats are there. The research is there. And you can even hear it in the topics. I inhabit my masculine energy. I inhabit my masculine energy because, there's certain issues and, daddy issues and husband issues and whatever the case is. But the truth is that, like you said, if you ignore your natural, what you were born to do and born to be, and you go the other way, you are definitely going to see your body rebel. Yes. Your body's like a shock absorber. So literally after that, you start to see the effects. But, control is the topic of the day. And we see people trying to control the narrative in the media. We see people fight to own news agencies. Governments fight to own news agencies so they can control the narrative. We see them controlling the apps now, buying the apps that are so famous and so commonly used so that they can control narratives. Mm-hmm. So control is a huge, huge topic right now.
And why do they want to control the narrative? Because they want to exploit it.
Yeah.
It's for self-serving purposes.
Yeah.
Right? But they'll paint it as if it's some great grand plan to uplift society and all of that nonsense and protect you from bad behavior and unethical behavior and all of that. But all they're doing is they're preventing you from actually understanding anything because they want you to understand it the way they think you must understand it.
Because it benefits them.
Right. Now look at how that plays out in the home. Our parents who are not emotionally accessible will see anyone challenging the way they see things as disrespect. And then you kill critical thinking. And if you kill critical thinking, all you're left with is the ability to develop confidence in your competence in something, but not self-esteem. Self-esteem is driven by your belief in your ability to be able to figure things out and to create value. And that's why it's so critical for the father to have that role with their children, because the father is the problem solver. They're analytical and practical by nature. So if I am keen on something, boy or girl, and I'm passionate about a certain field or a certain sphere or discipline, and I want to be able to figure it out and solve problems in that space so that I can improve my kind of competence in that, my proficiency in that. And if my father is not engaging with me, rather than just instructing and dictating to me what I must do, if he's not engaging with me in that space, automatically I develop a belief that I don't matter. Because what's important to me isn't important to him, so that means I'm not important.
Yeah. And it affects boys and girls differently.
It affects them differently, but the same as well, right? Because self-esteem is about what you think of yourself.
Yeah.
And what you think of yourself is relative to whether you believe that you are significant to the people that matter to you. And if you believe that the people who matter to you are don't see you as significant, that changes your internal narrative to be extremely, extremely self-defeating and toxic.
That is self-sabotage right there.
Yes.
And it takes, how long does it take to break that?
That's a difficult one to answer because I often get this question about how long, how much effort, how many sessions. It's about a moment of realization, but that moment of realization, to achieve it, requires a lot of awareness and understanding of how you got to that point. So it's not about how do you behave differently. It's about how do you see things differently so that you don't have to behave that way anymore.
And you need to become self-aware to know.
And that is, I always say that mindfulness is the holy grail of the 21st century. I think self-awareness is actually replacing it. Because mindfulness becomes easier if you're self-aware.
Yeah.
Self-awareness becomes easier if you have self-respect. But self-awareness and self-respect go hand in hand. The more self-aware you are and the more conscious, mindful you are about your values and what you stand for, and you are willing to hold yourself accountable for that, that automatically creates self-respect, because you're not going to be flip-flopping between value systems and things like that. So the more consistent we are between what we believe to be true versus how we act, the more that improves our self-respect. And then that makes it possible for us to be able to apply ourselves meaningfully in the things that we find value in. And accomplishing things that we find value in is what feeds our self-esteem.
Yeah.
So if you grow up in a space where your self-esteem was like pummeled into the ground, right? We accept that. It doesn't mean you're that way for the rest of your life.
That's the point I want to pause at.
Yes.
Doesn't mean you have to be that way for the rest of your life. How does this realization come? Like, hold on, I was taught this, and whether it's through witnessing someone else do it differently, how do people reach that point of realization? Like, I don't have to be that way. At what age does that dawn on people, in your experience?
Oh my God. Sometimes it only dawns on people when they're in their 50s and 60s.
Ooh.
And that's a hell of a lot of life wasted on a false narrative, right?
Yeah.
And the fastest way to get to the point of realizing who you are relative to who you thought you were is by understanding your parents, not judging them, not believing you can do better than them because you didn't like the way they did it. Understanding why it is that they showed up the way they did relative to their demons, their struggles.
And how they were raised.
Yes, what they were working with and whether they tried to give you better than what they had or not. So sometimes we have parents who are still like a bit aggressive and a bit like strict and unwavering and inflexible and all of that. And often I ask people, well, okay, I get that and I'm not condoning any of that, right? But tell me, what was their relationship with their parents? And they say, oh no, I would never survive that, or I would never ever be able to deal with it, and it was really terrible. And then my next question is, well, so are you saying that your parents are trying to give you better than what they had? Because relative to what they had, they're trying to do better than that. But you're expecting perfection out of that. You're not expecting just incremental improvement. And that's the problem, is that we have these ideals, especially with social media and all the gurus out there telling us how we must judge people and everything else. We have these ideals about this is how my parents are supposed to show up, and because they didn't show up that way, I can't stand them, and I don't want to have anything to do with them, and I don't want to be like them and all of that. Yeah, genius. One golden rule in life: the people you judge unfairly, you will be tested with the same circumstances to see if you're going to be doing any better.
I couldn't agree more.
And that test is going to come within the context of your life. It's not going to look like their test. And that's how there's no shortage of people who will tell you at some point, I don't know how I ended up here, but I turned out to be exactly like my father or exactly like my mother, even though I didn't want to be that way.
Yes. And you know what happens if you're a parent and you turning to your kid right now and go, don't do it like me. You know, they say, I read a quote that says, you must follow in the footsteps of your parents, right? Follow in the footsteps of your father. My father once turned to me and said, but skip a few. He said, skip a few. You know, but what happens if a parent is, their life's chaotic at the moment, and they can see that their kids are obviously observing all this, and they're not blind to the consequences, but they just don't know what to do. How do they react to the situation? How do they save their children from, you know, the consequences or just by observing their chaos? How do they save their children from doing the same or from it affecting their self-esteem? Yeah, like your life, it's my life. These are my decisions, but you don't like have to go the same route. And I'm so sorry for the way it affects you. How do I help you?
I think for starters, parents need to understand what impact they have. And they have impact, right? But unfortunately, when you have a low self-esteem as a parent, you automatically work with the assumption that you don't have impact, and that's why you become controlling or rigid or harsh or abrasive in how it is that you try to get across, because you work with the assumption that you're not going to be respected, you're not going to be obeyed, you're not going to be listened to, you're not going to be treated with significance or whatever. And because of that, you actually contaminate and you self-sabotage the very relationship with your children that you're hoping would be better than the relationship you might have had with your parents. So you need to get out of your head. You need to step back and consider if your children really see you the way you think they see you. And one more, and this is not entirely related to control, but it's an important point relating to the parent-child relationship. One question, and this was a sobering moment for me in my journey as a parent, right, is that I got to a point, and a lot of parents I speak to I ask them this one simple question: do your children know who you are outside of crisis mode?
Very important question.
And if they don't know that, how are they supposed to experience that side of you and respond to you in that way?
Yeah.
And most people, from the day they got married to 10, 20, 30 years later, they've been in crisis mode because they've been reacting to all the things that life is throwing at them and how difficult things are and all of that. And then when they get to 40s and 50s and they have their midlife crisis because they think they let down their teenage selves and all of that nonsense, then they want to reconnect with that, and they reconnect with that in a way that excludes the people around them. And here's the problem, is that, like, when was the last time you actually were or felt like the person you know yourself to be when you were carefree and more idealistic about life? And if you've lost that along the way, your children haven't experienced that in you, and now you're expecting them to be impacted or influenced by what you think you are. So children need to realize that their parents were in crisis mode for the most part, because parenting is not easy, adulting is not easy, right? And secondly, parents need to understand that them being in crisis mode means that their children didn't know any better. They didn't experience any better. So then when their children go out and they see other parents looking cool and looking easygoing in that, they develop a likability towards that, and then they start despising how their parents are showing up.
Because the comparison kicks in.
The comparison kicks in as a natural consequence. It's not because they're deliberately wanting to go and put their parents down.
Yeah. And looking at it from the child's point of view, you're keeping them in fight or flight.
Yes.
If you are in continuous crisis mode, they look at you like, oh my gosh, again.
Yes.
Like, the kid is literally in fight or flight all the time. And if there are siblings, and they've got siblings, they form a support system, and that unhealthy glue is your crisis.
Yes. And then you also get sibling rivalry, because then the elders or the earlier borns are at odds with how it is that they see the ease and the leniency of the ones that came later.
Yes.
The other problems you have is that the way they go about trying to relate to their parents becomes very, very dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Right? So there's so many problems with trying to control things rather than trying to develop a joint understanding of what it is that you guys are trying to achieve. That is not there. Most people don't have that understanding. They have these kind of superficial goals and milestones that they have in life, but how they want to go about achieving it or why it's even important in the first place, they're not on the same page.
The no value system is defunct. Sure.
Yeah.
Coach Said, we've got some feedback. We've got Asma saying, today's topic was so powerful and thought-provoking. It really got me reflecting. Thank you for bringing such important conversations to light. Looking forward to more shows like this. Zaid. That's what she said. So, yes, so we've got Mohammed saying, very important, making me reflect as a father on my role in my home.
Alhamdulillah.
So, I mean, I think that today's topic was amazing. What is your message? There can never be a final message. It's such a broad topic. What is your advice to parents, to people? I mean, control your overall, what is this thing of control? How do we, arrest it?
I think don't try to control things. Try to impact things, influence things, right? Your children are not expecting you to be in control. They're expecting you to be real. They need you to be real so that they learn what being real looks like.
Yeah.
So if you are afraid that you're going to get things wrong, you're driven by fear. You're not driven by aspiration. You're not driven by understanding or by conviction. And if you want to raise children who are going to do better than you did, you need to raise them with a connection with why it is that what you're saying is important. They must connect with the why, not just the how. And if you are so focused on the how, you're going to assume every single time that they don't follow through on the how that you told them to, you're going to assume that they're discarding your advice or they're rejecting you and they're disrespecting you.
Yeah.
It's because they haven't connected with the value of it. So this comes down to all sorts of things, especially the common complaint about teenagers and that about being lazy, lethargic, procrastinating, uninterested and all that. The only reason anyone gets lazy or lethargic or procrastinates is because they've lost sight of, or they just simply don't believe in the value of what it is that they need to do. So the only time they're going to get themselves to do it is if there are consequences. And then they're going to leave it to the absolute last minute before they do it.
Absolutely. Coach Zaid, Jazakallah khair for your time, for your pearls of wisdom. I know that this has touched lives today. To our listeners who have benefited from this and WhatsApp, thank you. This is not possible without you. And we look forward to bringing more pertinent conversations to the airwaves and challenging the norm, because we're not afraid to trigger.
Oh no,
at all.
Definitely not. In fact, we trigger happy in that regard.
Yes. It's about significance.
It makes me feel good, so I don't care.
Coach Zaid, Jazakallah khair. Have an awesome week ahead.
I mean, you too.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.